Welcome to episode 50 of the Propaganda Report. This is Monica Perez with Brad Binkley. Hey, Brad, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I am great. I am overwhelmed with stuff I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So buckle
What?
your
Yeah.
seat.
Yes.
Uh, I kind of want so many things. I absolutely have a handful of essential what to watch out fors, things that I just see coming. Can I rattle those off and then we can get into deeper topics? Because I absolutely cannot risk not getting them out there for
Yeah,
the
you better
record.
get them out before you
I got to
explode.
get them out. I can't stand it. I'm not going to be able to listen to anything you say, but I'll get my what to watch out for is out. So, and tell me if you've noticed any of these on
All
my
right.
list. I don't know if it's in any kind of order, but I think they're absolutely ramping up the black versus blue thing. The cop shooting, black people getting shot. I think for a while there, and I think this other kind of parallel, deplorables versus snowflakes is still an ongoing, a new civil unrest thing. You have the congressional baseball shooting where you have the kind of now deplorable on the left shooting GOP guys. But I feel like there were three things that happened that were all on the CNN website today. One was a pregnant woman in Seattle, black woman, called the police for help and was shot.
Yeah.
Then this Philando Castile, like the cop shooting, the black versus blue thing that launched Facebook Live, you will
Right.
remember, that the cop was acquitted, and for some reason I didn't catch, they released the entire video to the public today for
This
some
is from the
reason.
Milwaukee shooting?
That was Minneapolis,
Oh,
St.
okay.
Paul. And then there was the Milwaukee one. That cop was also acquitted.
Right. I saw
That was
that one.
Sylville Smith from Wisconsin. And that video is being played on CNN. Maybe I don't have the exact timing right, but I read them all on CNN.com today.
They
So
just all of those
they,
stories on the same day.
yes, they just blurted it out. So the cop acquittal thing would make people mad, and that was on the heels. I think the Philando Castile cop was acquitted a few days ago, but they released the video. Like first, that was a while ago. Why would they all of a sudden release the entire video? Oh, it was the dash cam video. Yeah,
Yeah.
why would the state release the dash cam video that augments the Facebook Live video right when people are pissed again? It just makes anyway. So I think the black versus blue thing, which I kind of thought was gone dormant in favor of the deplorables thing, is coming back. That's number one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to come back. I think it's one of those issues that they use it's one of those that they have in their pocket that they can always use to divide the public.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was just like an Obama era thing. I had so much hope with Obama that he was going to at least do some redemption on the race issue for the people who really are saddened by it, and instead it was the opposite. So I thought, well, maybe that will recede with him. But then I saw that Eric Holder is considering running for president. I thought, okay, that's obviously going to have some legs. I still think Elizabeth Warren is the heir apparent.
What about Kasim
Eric
Reed?
Holder, Kasim Reed could be there. I mean, I think I think he is a highly crafted personality. Like he's like an Obama type where they pick him out young. I think the Detroit mayor was one of those guys too, but he crashed and burned. But they do a lot of them in case somebody crashes and burns. They can trot out
Yeah.
one of them from the wings. I think Kasim Reed's got some real legs. I think for him, my ideas with him was not to be U.S. president. I think he's going to be the first kind of city president where this idea of strong cities, the UN strong cities, and when Trump backed out of the Paris climate change thing, and then like 60 governors and mayors and stuff said they were going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
That I think is a stepping stone towards negating the nation state in favor of world government, at least in the West, so that the cities report directly to the UN. And I feel like that's his role. Now, I don't think they're going to be independent. I think what happens is what regions are used for, what the nation is used for, what the UN is used for, what the Strong Cities programs, all that stuff is used for, is first to normalize the laws and the rules. So I don't think we're going to have all these petri dishes, incubators of best practices. I think first they're going to make us all these modular units with the same systems, and then just plug them in directly to the UN, so you have no layers of recourse. That's just
Absolutely.
So I'm not even getting into that, but Kasim Reed somehow seems to really play into that. And didn't you send me an article? I didn't get to read it, but that he was the most. What is it?
I have it up right now. He is. Mayor Reed and a Georgia judge are finalists for Government Secrecy Award. 2 Georgia officials, including Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed, have been named finalists for a dubious prize, being the most secretive person or agency in government.
Uh-oh. I lost
Can you hear me?
Now I do, yeah.
Reed earned his nomination for a February document dump in regards to the Atlanta City bribery scandal. And this is an award that's given by the investigative reporters and editors of the application judicial.
Yeah, didn't that happen the same week of the I-85, the suspicious I-85 collapse? Wasn't that when that bribery scandal was heating up, and then it just kind of receded into the background? Or am I...
It said the document dump was in February, so March, I believe, the end of March is when the bridge
I feel
collapsed.
like it was getting airtime, and then it just disappeared from the airwaves when we had that series of bizarre traffic events.
It says that this award is given annually by the journalism organization to highlight the most outrageous efforts to put a lid on public information. That's Kasim Reed.
It's highly effective. Highly effective. Yeah. So, all right. So, can I move on to my next one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I noticed a couple of headlines that really looked different to me from previous headlines. One today was a Fox News, the main page, the top headline. It was about the cop stabbed in an airport in Michigan. And the headline read, FBI eyes terror motive in shooting. And I saw a similar headline during the congressional baseball practice shooting, or stabbing, or whatever it is, during that shooting, the congressional baseball practice, where they said FBI on the scene immediately takes over investigation, whatever. And I thought, the FBI is getting so Mueller right after 9/11. I think he was one of those guys who was appointed on September 10th or September 12th or whatever in 2001. And he reshaped the FBI so that instead of being crime, it was like domestic crime. It was international counterterrorism, the FBI. So it was a very major shift. And I think we're about to have like a new kind of paradigm. Maybe the CIA goes backwards and the FBI takes a bigger role. I feel like the Comey thing, everything is setting the FBI up for something a bigger role in law enforcement, or in the terrorism, or in the totalitarianism, I guess I would say.
That was definitely Comey's. At least it seemed like Comey's entire purpose for that hearing is to defend the integrity of the FBI.
Yes. And just talk about, I noticed that Jeff Sessions, I think he said there were 35,000 people work for the FBI and report to him.
Wow.
I mean, that's a lot. Yeah, 35,000 people. I don't know how many are in the Department of Justice overall, but that's a lot. Maybe it's not a lot. There's, say, 30 huge cities in this country, and say it's 1,000 each. Maybe it's not that much, but I don't know. 1,000 should be able to take on, in addition to all the other law enforcement you have. So I just feel like the FBI, get ready for what to watch out for. The FBI will have a larger, more prominent, more crafted role in this totalitarianism / keeping us safe. That's number 2.
All right.
And then my number 3 is an article that has 2 things, actually. There's an A and a B. It was about inmates killing informants. So there's tons of articles, tons and tons. I actually wrote an article about it, about the prisons, what to watch out for. Prisons are, I don't know if they're going to get a lot of money or what, but there's just so many weird escapes and big news and guards getting killed. Big news. The Trump administration announced that they were going to scrap what I think were never real plans in the first place, but scrap Obama's supposed plans to make prisons public again. Prisons are so corrupt. Those guys, private prisons, they bribe legislators and judges to make mandatory sentencing laws and to throw the book at people so that they can get money by incarcerating people. I mean, it's sick. It's like stealing and killing at the same time. It makes me want to puke. So it's one place where this privatization thing is, I'm not a fan of privatization, of private entities providing services that are only handed out by the government. Like I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I don't think the government should be responsible for anything. However, if the government is, if I were a minarchist and I believe the government should be responsible for law enforcement, they need to do it because, and this is where people get to be like communists and socialists because they don't like profit, but that's not it. If they do it themselves, if you have private enterprise with a 100% government generated revenue, it allows them to take monopoly profits because there's nobody going to compete with them for anything. And it's really just a way to kind of launder this dirty money. Whereas if the government did it, yes, there would be corruption and all that kind of stuff too, but people would have to actually smuggle it out of the system. It would be illegal. I feel like this cronyism is just a recipe for corruption. And anyway.
Yeah, prison is a bad, it's such, anytime there's self-interest involved, and when people, I don't know how people who run prisons, I don't know what their mindset is like, but I think
I've really looked into it, and there is no doubt in my mind that this is what, I'm not saying people run it, I'm saying private enterprise has really corrupted the prison system.
Yeah. What I was saying was I would think that because the general population, there's a stigma to people who are in prison, so there might be some sort of rationalization that goes on with people who run prisons about criminals that makes them, feel okay about, exploiting the prison system for profit.
Yes, and my problem is that so much of this stuff is drugs. I think that, first of all, there are no crimes other than crimes against person and property. A victimless crime, a crime that's like a prohibited product or item should not be a crime. But if you are going to have those as crimes, these nonviolent, no victim crimes, they should never have jail time, ever, ever, ever. You should not be able to forcibly incarcerate somebody for having an arm's length transaction for drugs or sex or whatever. Absolutely not. So maybe they think that. I would disagree with that from a moral perspective. But I will say, in the 90s, there was that like big criminal justice crackdown, whatever, on the federal level, and incarceration rates went through the roof. And I'll tell you, I think gun ownership might also went up. I think gun laws were loosened up around this time. They were two parallel events. But I'll tell you, I think there is a chance that this massive incarceration rate is correlated to our plummeting crime. Our crime rate has plummeted. Are you aware of that? Over the past 20 years, the murder rate is like an all-time low.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. Like if you look at it, you wonder what the heck. And I've wondered, and people are like, oh yeah, it's because we took the lead paint out. Somebody said it's because now we have abortion and you kill the people who would be unwanted and bad. I mean, crazy theories have come out, really offensive. And I am the last person to say high incarceration rates. I'm a hardcore libertarian, but you just have to, regardless of the morality, it happens to be correlated. Is it causal? I don't know, but it's worth thinking about. Anyway, so I think the prison thing is a scam, and it's going to get, and maybe, I don't know what, but watch out for some big prison thing coming down the road. But part of this article today, which really scared me, was I had just written on the front page of the newspaper, this North Korean guy, prisoner, whatever, came home and died. And now Trump's like, oh, that's it. We got a new North Korea or whatever.
Yeah, what's the full story behind that? I know the guy came home and he has what's his last name? He's
dead.
Yeah, I know he's dead now.
Willard, was it Williamard? I have it.
He had a last name that I didn't realize.
You with me?
Wombeer or something, right?
Yeah, I got it somewhere. Ugh, I bought a New York Times today. I got to sift through that nonsense. Hold on. What? Whoa. Hold on.
Are you digging through your stack of New York Times cave that you have built in your office?
Those are Wall Street journals.
Oh, that's right.
No, I bought a New York Times because I wanted to see how they were covering the Handel Ossoff thing. But
it's a win for Democrats.
Yeah. Yes. That's funny. How can I not? Anyway, it would have been easier to use the supercomputer. I don't even have the answer. Anyway, so this guy, he came home and I'm really stunned. I don't have it handy. But he died, and supposedly because he was abused in North Korea, whatever. But
when he came home, was he already in a vegetative state, or did he fall into a vegetative
he was in a coma. And here's the thing. So here's why I flagged it. It's like, actually what you're talking about. I was like, this is not a very robust story. It's like not very fleshed out. It's just this guy. Whoop, that's it. That guy, something happens. Look at the picture. Right. Here we go. And I wrote in the margin, I said, when are they going to start anonymizing, making anonymous victims? So then they can just roll out. They don't even have to tell a real story. They can just say, 300 people died in this bombing and we have to go to war. You know what I mean? So I was already seeing, like, if they barely gave this guy a story, why even give him a name? Because then you could really research and see what the real story was with this guy. Maybe he had an illness already and, maybe there's something more to it, but you could really research it because you knew his name. But so in this article of the prisons where it says that informants are being killed by inmates, it says, so we want to start like not revealing that, not letting people know who their accusers are. So you would not be able to face your accuser in a court of law, which it says, some of those bleeding hearts defense attorneys, I think this could be a civil rights problem. Like, yes, it could definitely be a civil rights problem because the whole thing is to protect you against political persecution. And if they just say, well, some guy said you're bad, we're going to lock you up for 20 years. I mean, you could target anyone for any reason.
Right. Every accusation the Washington Post makes could be, Yeah.
And then you couldn't even debunk that person himself. You couldn't even mount a defense. So this is an attack on due process that's super scary to me. And I am definitely flagging that as a what to watch out for. I hadn't heard it before, but when they start cracking down, I want more transparency, not less. I think they should not do plea bargains. I think they should never give jail time for nonviolent offenses. And they should absolutely live stream every single jury trial, have a dedicated URL, and everyone should be able to see everything. Unless maybe it's a rape victim who wants privacy there. But
I would watch that channel.
Oh my God! Like, that's a great. It wouldn't be a channel; it'd be 1,000 channels. It would be 1,000. Courtroom in the country should just have a live streaming URL, unless you can get a court order to stop it. That way, I think, and anybody who's shot to death in the commission of a crime, there should be a posthumous trial. There should be every single law enforcement should have a hearing on that. Should have to explain, in open court why he did that. It should be scary for a cop to have to kill somebody. They should really think twice about it because it's so easy if you know that person. I mean, they say, I've read crime stories where they're like, hey, there can't be a trial in this case, and then the guy winds up dead. So
Yeah, that's the opposite of what they're creating, though. They don't want that to happen. They want police officers to be on edge. They want the African
Yes.
American community to be on edge, and they
Yes.
want, when those two forces come
Yes.
together, they want people to have, to be anxious, to make it more likely that something bad's going to happen.
Right. And I think transparency is a way to combat that. And this is the opposite of that. This making witnesses anonymous, victims anonymous, all that stuff anonymous, closed records. It's not cool. National security reasons, you can't talk about stuff. Not cool. So those are my 3/4 what to watch out for.
All right, I'll keep my eyes open.
Okay.
Well, you said
you'll watch out for those things?
Yes, I will watch out for them personally.
Okay, don't worry. I will remind you.
You said something
new example
that made me think of how many terror attacks have happened in the past, or potential terror attacks have happened in the past, week and a half? Like 4?
All over the place, because there was the Belgian thing, outside of this country. I noticed they're starting to pop up again in this country, but they're domestic terrorists, right? Or homegrown. It's so. Anyway.
I just mean any that I've heard. I've heard so many, I feel like, on the news over the course of the past couple weeks.
Yes. Oh, so we're headed into a period of tension. You know what it might be building up to?
What?
What Theresa May called for, the international regulation of the internet from a content point of view. Like we've never talked about that in this country like that. Like what she's calling for is radical.
Well, what I was saying, I agree with that. What I was saying, that I was relating it back to what you said about not even giving the victim of something a name or enough information for people to research. To me, this is just, it's a complete desensitization, kind of like the vulgarity stuff from last week. Is if you just keep putting these terror attacks in front of people, and we keep seeing them, it becomes an everyday occurrence, and we're not affected by them, which to me makes me think they're going to start to happen more and more closer to home.
I have noticed that. I used to think they wanted to make the most of every event, and then I realized they actually do not. They just kind of overwhelm you with a cascade of events. And one small part of that, I think, maybe a big part, but was something I observed reading that book, The Report from Iron Mountain, where they talked about they would run computer models to see cause and effect on events, like how many people it would take to get hurt or die or whatever to change the policy attitude of the people towards a policy they did not previously want. And I started to realize that it might actually be more quantitative than qualitative. So the intensity of the emotion, they only need that once in a while. And then they just, if they can rack up the numbers, well, there are 15 attacks like this happened this year. 15 is one in every city of this country, like that kind of thing. That these are just to rack up the numbers.
Yeah, and to keep it fresh on people's minds.
Yes, I agree with that. And what happens is and they actually say this, like this is what people say this to me. It's so predictable. They say, oh, enough is enough. That's it. Enough is enough. So I mentioned this before, I was talking to a European friend about Syria. I was like, why do we have to go to war with Syria? Oh, well, we've had enough of that. We need to just wipe Syria off the map. I was like, no, that's why they're doing that. If you just said, I will never advocate wiping Syria off the map, these guys would stop shipping them in. Although I read
we just need to get rid of Syria completely.
Yeah, so it's no problem for whatever. Dinner.
Just drop a nuke on Syria and get it over with.
They like their luxuries over there. But I read a scary article that suggested, I have no idea if it's true or not, but it was an idea that I thought might bear just thinking about going forward, is that Germany is very industrial. And I have noticed that industrialists like low wages, go figure. So they actually, even though they come off as Republicans and conservatives and stuff, a lot of times the guys behind the scene, the money guys, want immigration, want a lot of cheap, uneducated immigrants to come in and lower the wages. And I read that German industrialists bribed, whatever, Merkel to bring in those young, poor men, so they always talk about like 18 to 24-year-old men are just swat. Why is she only taking those? Did she want people to get blown up? And I was thinking, this idea was that they were pressuring her to let them in for laborers. Now, I don't know if the stats bear that out, if they actually do go and work, or what's the story, but I think that's something worth observing going forward.
Potentially. I have a clip that goes with what you're saying about Syria.
Oh, good.
Let's hear it.
Yes, I would like to hear it.
How do you say this guy's name? The guy who's on Fox all the time. Hold on a second. Krauthammer, is that how you say his name? Charles Krauthammer?
I think it's Krauthammer. Charles Krauthammer.
No,
maybe Krauthammer. Yeah, it's close. Definitely close to that.
This is about a 2.5 minute clip, and it's talking about, I think the context is pretty good. And it's Tucker Carlson basically asking this guy, what's going on with Syria? I thought it was about ISIS, but then we just bombed this plane. I think it was one of Assad's planes or something.
We shot a drone and a plane of the Syrian government. I mean, this is...
So he's explaining Syria to Tucker Carlson, which I know you love both of these guys very much.
I didn't want to ruin the mood by telling you how hard it's going to be for me to sit through this, but I'm going to.
All right, here it is.
Charles, I'm legitimately confused. I thought that our main opponent there and everywhere was the Sunni extremist organization ISIS, and now I pick up the paper and see that we're shooting planes down from a government that is also fighting ISIS, that is representing the Shiites. And so is the main threat in Syria the Assad regime, or is it ISIS? Sincerely, I don't know.
Well, this is like the last year of the Second World War. We're all fighting the Nazis, but we know they're finished. And a lot of the maneuvering in that last year was between us and the Soviet side for what it would look like after the Nazis were finished. Right now, ISIS, which is the main enemy, is about to be driven out of Mosul, which will mean that Iraq has been cleared of them. And what's going on now is the encircling of Raqqa, their last stronghold. They're based in Syria. Within 6 months, probably a year, both of them will be gone. And everybody knows that. So what's going on right now in Syria is the maneuvering. The Iranians want to inherit the territory that's going to be lost by ISIS. They showed that by launching rockets today over Iraq into Syria, ostensibly at ISIS as retaliation for the terror attacks, but really a demonstration to Saudi Arabia, the Sunni Arabs, and everybody in the region of their reach. The Iranian objective is to inherit the territory of ISIS, which gives them control of the entire northern part of the Middle East, from Iran through Iraq, through Syria to the Mediterranean. The Persians have not had that in 2,000 years, and it is within their grasp. So the Russians, the Iranians, the Syrian regime are all on one side, and the maneuver is to make sure they get the territory that ISIS loses. Our interest is to make sure that doesn't happen. That's why we attack the forces of Assad, who are hitting our allies on the ground, who are the Kurds, and there are these Syrian rebels who, together with the Kurds, are closing in on Raqqa. Our objective, you were asking earlier, what's our objective in the region? It is simple. We don't want to see Assad have a puppet regime which will be run by Iran and Russia in control of all of Syria. We don't want them to inherit the ISIS territory. We would like to see that held by pro-Western, pro-Saudi, Sunni forces.
So it's not about ISIS really at all, is what he's...
Oh, gosh. Can I please respond to that?
Yes, I knew you would have something to say.
I'm like throwing up in my mouth. I don't like to get into the Israel stuff. I really don't. It's very emotional. People are upset. I grew up in New York. It's terrifying to Jewish people to think about anti-Semitism in the world. They feel like Israel is, they need to have that so there's a place to go, or that, it's a very emotional issue. And then you have like the left gets emotional about the Palestinians. There's the boycott thing, whatever. I don't like to get into it. There are a lot of people on both sides fighting that fight. But there is a right-wing faction in Israel that is running the country right now. And I believe they're responsible for numerous documents over the decades, from Oded Yinon in the 80s, a clean break in the 90s. I've read numerous things about the Six-Day War, a parallel between Six-Day War, which brought in this idea of preemption, that you could start a war and blame it on the side that did not start the war. All of these documents and other writings, you show Syria specifically as a target. So I think Oded Yinon's plan was to Lebanonize it or Balkanize or whatever they call it, where they break it up into pieces. Clean break, I think, was the one that introduced this idea of preemption. We can start shooting missiles into Syria. We've got a problem with Syria because of Gaza, whatever. I mean, whatever their territorial disputes are, I think this is more, on the one hand about that. So when you bring Iran in and say, we just want to make sure Iran doesn't have this reach, well, you have this history where Syria, which was pretty independent, like they called Assad the father, bloody Assad, but that was because he put down a Muslim Brotherhood uprising that was trying to take over the country out of Homs in 1984. So things were very hot back then. And when you and recently, the catalyst for the Syrian thing, what was not necessarily Israel, it from a big part of it was that they were going to cooperate with Iran and Russia to bring gas up from the gas field that Qatar and Iran share through Turkey into Europe. Gas into Europe is important. It's what Syria is about, and it's what Ukraine is about. So when Syria and Ukraine went with Russia, they both got blown up. They had to undergo regime change orchestrated by the West. So the Syrian thing, where in order, so a lot of the so-called civil war in Syria was really agents provocateur and mercenaries, largely from Saudi Arabia, gone in there to kind of try to blow that country up the way they did in Libya, and it was a lot easier in Libya. But that wasn't even that effective. What they did was, I remember when Islamic State popped up in Iraq against the Yazidis on Father's Day a couple of years ago, and I immediately pegged it as, oh, that's the back door to Syria. They're going to use this as an excuse to go into Syria. And several years later, a document from 2012, which was part of that, the Defense Intelligence Agency that Mike Flynn was running at the time said, we would love an Islamic State and a Salafist principality to pop up on the border of Iraq and Syria to give us an excuse to invade Syria and unseat Assad, which is exactly what Saudi Arabia wanted. So it reminds me so much of Afghanistan. Afghanistan was a socialist, secular country in the 70s. It had a secular socialist government, no religion, nothing, but they were allied with Russia, which was near them. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, the national security advisor for Carter, and maybe even Charlie Wilson was in on it at the time, Charlie Wilson's war, they went in and prompted by radicalizing Islam there with Osama bin Laden or his Afghans or whatever, they provoked the Soviet Union to enter to save that government that they were allied with. And then we say that we were there to respond, that we created the Mujahideen to respond to the Russian invasion. No, we created it to provoke the Russian invasion. And then the narrative ever after has been that we were batting against this aggression from Soviet Union. I feel like it's the same thing with Syria for different reasons, whether it's Israel's plan to deal with its territorial disputes, or Saudi Arabia's interest in being the regional hegemon in competition with Iran, or it's the gas that comes out of the Qatar, Iranian gas field up through Syria to Europe. Whatever it is, I would say every step of the way, the West provoked and enabled, if not downright created, ISIS, the unrest, the civil war, all of it. And you could sort of present it like Iran or Russia or whatever is super aggressive like that, is provoking all this stuff. It's really the West that has these ambitions. Is that A, too much to absorb, or B, I don't think it's any more than Charles Krauthammer gave you, and or C, like, is it too disturbing for people to hear that? I hate to go down that road because people get super worked up about it, but that is my understanding of how of the kind of broad brushstrokes in counterpoise to what this guy was saying.
I don't think it's any heavier than what Krauthammer was saying. And it's true that's how, I mean, that's a totally right up, Bernays' engineering of consent alley is you always provoke so that it looks like the other person strikes first so that you can justify to your public what you're doing. So that falls in line with give the public a reason to accept whatever war that you have actually provoked. They just don't realize it. And it just, to me, what you said and what he said, it's just the general public is told that the simple answer about what's going on in Syria is that we're, trying to take out ISIS.
But here's the thing. So there's two things. One is, this is why it makes me absolutely sick. People ask me what I think of the mainstream media, and the mainstream media provides a lot of facts. So if Trump sets the stage for, and this congressional baseball thing shuts down the government so that we can no longer have access to government and information and can't use the mainstream media, that will not be better. However, there is the real purpose of the media, maybe it's 20% of the content, but it's 100% of its purpose, is this propagandizing us, and it's atrocity propaganda. And the facts are right in the media a lot of times, but when it comes to this stuff, it's really not. And that's the stuff we cannot verify. The stuff that we can verify, I think the spin is awful, but a lot of the facts, most of the facts are correct. Whereas this stuff, you have no access. They've closed down their news bureaus over there. So even the news people who are writing the articles don't even know that what they're getting is highly filtered, crafted stuff. Even the military guys over there, I think, are highly insulated in what they understand. And my approach and recommendation, I hope I'm wrong about all of it. I want to just wrap myself in a flag and say, I am so glad. I would never say my country right or wrong, but I would like to say my country is always right, that we really care about justice. We do not steal and we do not kill. That is what we live by. I would like to believe that, and I hope someone can convince me. But my method is I go and I read it all. I try to get international news. I see what narratives hold together. I try to figure out what the evidence is. I really individually scrutinize source after source to see if they're disinfo, total BS, stupid, wrong, government related, whatever it is. What makes sense? What's the history? I think you can arrive at a conclusion that makes sense if you're willing to do the work and not have it spoon fed to you on Fox, while you're having a beer. I love to watch TV and have a beer, but I can't watch that stuff anymore. Well, I don't drink beer too much, but I don't watch that stuff. I can't. I only watch it to see what he is saying, not to figure out the answer. I want to know what the propaganda is.
Yeah.
So I think the truth. I really urge people not to take my narrative as truth and don't take his narrative as truth. Really, you must figure it out. And by all means, if you think you cannot figure it out, that's completely 100% fine. But in that case, you simply cannot consent to military action. If you can't be sure that you're not killing innocent people, you cannot consent to it from a moral point of view. In my opinion, I'm not trying to preach. I'm just saying I really feel like that is the bottom line. It's like, I don't need you to know. I don't need you to understand. I don't need you to understand because I'm not telling you to kill anybody. He needs you to believe his story because he's trying to tell people to kill each other. And Tucker Carlson's dad, I think, was a bigwig in USIA, which is what Clapper wants to be, USIA on steroids, which is this counter-propaganda stuff that was designed to undermine Soviet influence abroad. Tucker Carlson's dad, I believe, was a big shot there.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That falls in line with I talk about this book all the time. Public Opinion, Walter Lippmann. I mean, he talks about in that book that the leaders of the rank and file and the leaders of the government, they keep the public, they keep their attention away, and they keep them divided by throwing domestic issues that affect them, that they can feel the effects of, and having them just meddle over those things while they keep them as far away from foreign policy as possible, and they just spoon feed them simple answers.
Yes,
because they don't want the public thinking about the complexities of the foreign policy. They want them.
Irving Kristol said that the American people. He was a big time neoconservative. And his son is the head of the Weekly Standard, I think, and he writes for National Review. I mean, he's also a big propagandist out there. But this guy said that the American people, he urged Republicans, he said the American people must be led when it comes to foreign policy. And then he says in parentheses also economics. He said, but the job of the ruling class is to guide them and shape their opinions. I mean, if that's what democracy, a democratic republic has come down to, I mean, that's just a manipulation.
That's what Bernays says. That's Bernays' theory, pretty much regurgitated. That Bernays writes books about that specific thing, how the intelligent few who are able to step outside of their groupthink, the individual group that has the most influences over them and can look at everything, who are smart enough to be able to look at everything reasonably instead of emotionally, they should work behind the scenes to form opinion or to, tell people what to do.
Well, it makes me wonder, if you peel that onion, that foreign policy stuff is purely, it's imperialism. And so when Kristol said he was shocked to be in this community of lawmakers and have them actually caring what the people thought. He's like, what, are you stupid? That's not what democracy is about. He didn't say it like this, but I'm just peeling the onion saying what he's actually demonstrating to me is and I think it has become this. I don't know if it was always meant to be this, but that democracy is truly a way to get people to consent to even more taxes, even more imperialism that they would never consent to if they were subjects to a king. They would never give half their money for this king's greater glory to take over the world. I mean, maybe they would, but it might be a harder sell than to think that it's their choice. It's just a way that it's just a manipulation to get you to believe you have consented. And I mean, free will, you must consent, but the responsibility to fight against your own government, I think, is almost beyond what can be expected. That to have a pathocracy who you have consented to because you think it's an actual government with, that is a community of people who have pooled their right to self-defense for a more efficient and secure system, and it ends up that's being used against them. Most people just don't have the time or the cynicism to look at it that way. I think I do think it's bad. I don't think that we're just fools. I think it's just so manipulative that people are not ready for it.
It's totally manipulative. Manipulative, and they've been studying. Bernays talks about in his books all the time. He talks about the Public Relations Council, which is propagandist, or he even says propagandist. He uses the terms interchangeably. They rely on their in-depth study and knowledge of individual and group psychology. And he even lists off what propagandists, what they should study, what the ideal propagandist should have a in-depth field of knowledge in. It's social psychology, it's sociology, it's history.
And they use our tax dollars. I hate research money because they use our tax dollars, figure the stuff out, and they don't tell us it, and they use it against us, and they invade our actual minds, the fiber of our souls.
Yeah, and the problem is that we all think that we're immune to it because it's natural. It's a blind spot bias that we have, and they intentionally make people believe that propaganda is just some simple thing that only the other guy is going to be under the influence of. Like people on the left think that only people on the right, or they're just drunk off of Trump propaganda. People on the right think that it's just people on the left who are just drunk off Clinton or whoever, the resistance propaganda. But in reality, it's not the opposition's propaganda that we're most vulnerable to. It's the propaganda of the groups that we identify with, who we don't expect to propagandize us because they say things that that connect with us, and when they say those truths or they win us over emotionally, we let our critical guard down, and they can slip in lies or manipulations in between. The what's the X-Files quote is, the best way to tell lies is in between two truths. Use that theory from people we're not looking out for. Yeah, go ahead.
I have observed for a while, I think some of the stuff that we do plays into Putin's narrative for his own people.
Yeah.
So, and I think those people who grew up under communism and knew that the media could not be trusted was simply an arm of the government, which it was. People in England don't think of the BBC as having been created by the War Department and still owned by the government. They don't think of it as a war propaganda tool, but it is exactly the same as like Pravda and stuff. They say it's not, because it's not, but it is. But the Russian people, I think, are more skeptical now when I look at, and so our people are very, very vulnerable because we have this history, I think, I assume it was sincere. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt, a sincere history of the open press. But I look at this fake news thing that they're coming down with, and over and over and over, people talk about Yates, Clapper, I don't know if it was Comey, but many people have come from official channels saying, most important thing, Vern Jordan, is that we have to set up these screens that tell people what's real or not. And I have this theory about truth in advertising laws. There are truth in advertising laws, right? You can't lie.
Yeah.
You know what that does? It allows advertising to work, because it guarantees to the people, these are not hucksters. It would not be on your screen if they were hucksters. We've taken care of that for you. Whereas if they didn't have truth in advertising laws, advertising would not work, because it would be so infiltrated with bull that people just would never believe it. I never believe it. I never click on ads. I never think about ads. I never believe any of it.
Yeah, me either. And what you just said is exactly right. It also enables, in fact, it forces people to, or businesses and politicians, and Ossoff was totally, this is why I grew to dislike him strongly, because of this, the way that he continued to propagate this lie. But it enables them to do the worst kind of lie, which is the lie by omission. When you phrase something in a certain way that you know how the audience is going to perceive it, it's just as bad as telling them a direct lie, but you don't actually have to say the lie. So that enables you to say, no, I didn't lie. How am I supposed to know how they're going to interpret it? And for Ossoff, and all politicians do this, but like you said, because of these advertising laws, it forces them to do this, and it makes the public even more so ready to accept it. And they can also defend themselves by saying they never lied. Media does it all the time, but Ossoff's lie was the one about where he phrased the thing about his foreign policy. I worked 5 years as a congressional staffer. I earned top level security clearance, and then he stops his sentence there. So people who like him are their brain is going to create a narrative. That's how our brains work. They don't leave the story untold. So their brain says, oh, he had top level clearance for 5 years. That's an impression. Yes. When in reality, he got national security clearance because the guy he was working for, Hank Johnson, needed him in there so he could take notes for him. That's how he earned his top security clearance. And he had it for 6 months. And
Hank.
Right. And he was asked about this over and over again. And this is what makes me think the people who were asking him questions, they were told that they weren't allowed to cross a certain line, or they just themselves weren't going to, because they would say, there's been some confusion on your national security thing. Did you exaggerate these claims? And Ossoff would say, no, I never exaggerated those claims. I worked as a congressional staffer for 5 years, and I earned top security clearance. So he never actually clarified. He still says the same thing.
I do wonder who keeps reporters from digging in. I know in my experience that I am discouraged. I was in the past. I've completely blown past anybody who thought they had to protect me from myself, and like trying to get just when people would tell me, I've mentioned it before, where people would say, don't say that, it makes you sound crazy. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. I'm saying it. And it's okay. But other people will tell you not to do it. But there was one thing that I heard this Joe Atwill, I think his name is, mentioned. I had not heard this before, that Donald Trump's uncle, Dr. John Trump, was an MIT professor for 40 years. He worked for the National Defense Resource Board or something. He was the director of microwave, I don't know what, but he was the guy who beat Tesla's nephew to death when Tesla died. Nikola Tesla died. Within several hours, I think it was, before the nephew could get to his where he died, Dr. John Trump came in, got Tesla's papers, and the nephew never saw them again. So I think he was working for the government at the time. That is some deep state military industrial complex stuff. And Tesla, he was the guy who supposedly was kind of sequestered in a hotel room by the Rockefellers for cracking the code on free energy. Now, that is controversial. Some people say that Russia tried to do it and couldn't figure it out or whatever, but that guy's papers are the probably the most earth-shattering change in would change the world. And here, now that I'm thinking about it, I actually read something about Dr. John Trump that was unrelated to the Tesla thing. It was in his wiki entry. I don't think it says anything about Tesla in his wiki entry. And it says that he invented or had access to the death ray. But didn't Tesla invent the death ray?
That's the story, that he...
Yes, so look at Dr. John. I'll write it in the...
That's really interesting.
I'll put in the show notes. I'll put his wiki entry. And if it says that thing about the death ray, that's funny because, maybe it clicks through, but I don't think it mentioned Tesla. Anyway, I'm just saying, it's so interesting to me, really fascinating. But why, Jeff Zucker, those guys are not fools. The Democrats are not fools. They're not clowns. That information is out there. It was on an NPR. I think I saw it in an NPR article from some years ago. So the information is absolutely out there, and nobody ever brought it up. Why wouldn't someone write an article for The Atlantic that said, he's not an insider? This was his father's connections to government, his uncle's connections to government, his sister's connections to government. He's not an outsider. This is his connection to the Rothschilds. It's his connection to Soros. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do know what you're saying.
Who told him not to do that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, who told him not to do that? I also think it plays into what you were saying, what we talked about last show, where it's regardless of who the candidate is, they're going to be categorized as that hated stereotype. Because that's a simple way to create that mass rage anyway.
I know, but they could have defeated him from the inside. Like why didn't Handel go after Ossoff with stuff about he talks about your taxes? His dad has a tax company. He talks about creating jobs that was in England. You know what I mean? Like, why didn't she? Did I miss something? Did she?
No, she didn't go after him about any of that stuff. I think probably because there's some of the same connections there. I think if you look deep enough, they're going to be tied together. And if she outs him, she's going to be outing herself.
That's why Garland Favorito, the voter GA guy, says they don't truly out the actual problems with the voting. Like, neither side ever really talks. So the Democrats are talking about, Garland doesn't talk about this, but he just said that, period, on Garland. But forward, the Democrats are focusing on rushing and hacking and propaganda, which is not the problem. I think there were some some vote flipping shenanigans in a couple of critical Trump districts. I think that should be investigated, and it was written about in some really obscure, well, maybe it's not obscure, but Richard Sharnon's blog mentioned it kind of in passing. So it's out there, it's documented, there's a smoking gun there that should be investigated by these people and reported on. And likewise, the illegal immigrant thing, I have known so many illegal immigrants in California, the DMV, ineligible to vote. And that is just a true fact. So the millions of illegal immigrants vote. That is just plain true. And for every mainstream media thing to say that's, just dismiss it, why isn't the right just proving it? The only place I saw any kind of evidence was InfoWars, which I skipped past because I think it's disinfo.
Yeah, well, InfoWars is just like any of the other outlets. They provide legit information, and then they slip in lies or in between them. We got a tweet, not a tweet, but a Gab. What's it called on Gab when you get a thing?
Oh, maybe it's Gab.
We got a Gab. We got a Gab from somebody who voted in the 6th district. Did you see this?
Really? No, yeah. I didn't. Is it from JB?
Yes, and she said, here, I'll read it. She said she went to vote in the 6th district today, and a woman came in behind me and told the poll worker that she had left her ID at a store in Cumming, about 20 minutes away. They asked for another government-issued ID, which she did not have. So they offered her another option, which sounded like paper ballot mail-in. I couldn't quite hear. And she said, should I go back and ask? I don't know if she went back and asked or not. But that sounds, they were trying to find another way for this person to vote.
Well, Karen Handel's the one who brought voter ID to Georgia. And there is no voter ID in California, by the way. So like all those illegals, there is no ID. I mean, even though they would have the driver's license, I think you can get a driver's license if you're illegal out there. It's so crazy. But Karen Handel was responsible. I think that was her only legitimate victory. Did you see that YouTube video I posted? I tweeted. It was saying that voter ID laws are racist is racist.
Yes, I saw that. And
they go around in Harlem and they're like, do you have an ID? Every single person's like, what are you, some kind of jerk? Like, of course I have an ID. Are you sure? Can you figure out how to go to DMV? It's like, what are you talking about? It's so funny. It's like, do you think it's harder for Black people to get IDs? And it was like, what do you mean? Like, fill out the forms? It's so funny. So I absolutely, so the voter ID thing is so stupid. What is wrong with having, anyway, whatever. So I don't like Karen Handel. I don't like Ossoff, probably even more, but I think that it was a fine thing for her to do. And so maybe they were working with it. I would be surprised if there were funny business at that level in Georgia right now. I think there's plenty of funny business, but I would be surprised.
You wouldn't be?
I do. I think it would be hard to actually cast a vote if you did not have an ID. I think it would be difficult. I maybe will engage with JB and see if she got to the bottom of it.
Yeah, who knows? So do you want to hear Ossoff's short little concession speech that he gave?
Yes. I was so burnt out by then. I did not listen to it.
I wasn't going to listen to it, but I finally just decided to. And then do you remember, obviously you remember Obama's speech at the DNC that kind of launched his presidential campaign, right?
What?
You do remember Barack Obama's speech at the DNC?
Oh, yes. Sorry,
I
missed that you said Obama. Oh, absolutely. I remember that. I remember people going bananas. I almost think that was racist too. They were going bananas. They're like, this guy is so articulate. Everything. I was like, what?
Right. Well,
why are you so shocked that a politician can read a teleprompter? Like, what is your problem? Yeah. And I remember being like, I don't get the thrill with this guy, but of course, the word was out. Go bananas.
Yeah, I mean, and they go bananas here too. This is Ossoff's version of that.
I understand what you're saying. Oh, that's fantastic.
And
because I did see a quote where he said, "This is the start of something bigger." Did I just steal your punchline? I'm sorry.
No, yeah, just here it is. And really he does say stuff like that. But what bothers me the most about it is he's tried to sound and speak like Obama the whole time. But in this clip, his Obama, he is trying so hard to nail his Obama impersonation.
Was he actually wearing like big ears?
He's in blackface while he's on. I'm sorry, that's insensitive. Probably terrible joke.
I think you can't. Not even laugh. You went too far. You go too far.
It's just so disgusting how badly he's trying to mimic. Even in his
yes,
you know how Obama the crowd will interject and Obama will go, "It's true, it's true." He'll validate.
But what's funny is that the cadence that Ossoff copies of Obama, to me, is a flaw of Obama's. It's actually the one part of him that is not polished, is that stilted speech. Now it's iconic, so
it makes him human.
Yeah, so that's why you're like what we were talking about last time about how accessing the stereotype is a simple and effective way to trigger, to associate certain thoughts and feelings to what this new experience.
Yeah.
Right. So the fact that it's now an iconic cadence is going to work for this guy. But the funny part is it's actually kind of annoying. Obama, he's better when he doesn't do it.
Yeah. Here it is. Oh, wait. Hold on. I thought it was. All right. There we go.
For people across the country.
Right off the bat.
And for people around the world. This small community in Georgia, which has become the epicenter of politics, sometimes to my chagrin, for months now. And it's had nothing to do with me. It never.
Oh my gosh, this is crazy.
It's about you. It's about an extraordinary community at an extraordinary moment in history. The first opportunity in this country to make a statement about values that can still unite people. Oh. At a time when politics has been dominated by fear and hatred and scapegoating and division, this community stood up. Women in this community stood up.
It's like saying 9/11. Everybody stands up.
Exactly, Lois on Family Guy.
And you picked this campaign up, and you picked me up, and you...
Now, did you notice there while they were cheering? They're going, wow, he goes, you did. That is totally a Barack Obama thing. I'll take it back.
There was so much Barack Obama. That's crazy. There was so much Barack Obama. Are you finished? Is there...
Wait, hold on.
And you picked this campaign up, and you picked me up, and you picked Alicia up, and you carried us on your shoulders.
Oh, I can't listen to anymore. How much more is there?
That's the end of it.
Make it stop. I can't. I'm literally throwing up in my mouth.
It's even the way he's like trying to move when you watch it. He's just trying to mimic Barack Obama. And he says the comment about values that can still unite people. And everybody just goes crazy. But he said absolutely
values. Like,
nothing.
name one. Would someone screaming in the crowd name a value? Women.
Value, yeah. Women.
Women. That's a value.
Sit up in this community.
Women. Wait, did you ever see like Pygmalion or My Fair Lady or even Trading Places? Do you know what those?
I know what Trading Places is with Eddie Murphy.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. I love Eddie Murphy. And I love Charlie Murphy. Anyway. That thing, the premise of that all is that you can take anyone and just craft them into whatever it is you're trying to do. So it's, or like, I never watched American Idol, but I think that Kelly Clarkson, who was the first American winner, and I think she was a Ron Paul supporter, which is when people started to distance, I think, but she wrote a little expose or whatever about her boss, whatever, some big time producer. I just forget his name. I'm sure you've heard his name. And she was writing what like a jerk he was, because she was like telling him about her like needs and desires. And he was just obviously had it. And he said, "You don't understand, honey. I could crush you. You're nothing. There's nothing to you. If it weren't for me, and I could put somebody else on my hand, and they would be my sock puppet." So something like that, And she was just like, "What a jerk." And I'm thinking, oh, that's 100% true. Like, I'm not dissing her. I'm sure she's very talented, whatever. But so to see this guy, and he's actually not very good at it at all. Like, Obama actually was great at it, and he was groomed for it since he was a kid, given that his stepfather was a really deep state guy, and his mother was super deep state too. So he was, and his grandfather. So he was surely groomed from a very early age for this. I guess Ossoff is more or less groomed from an early age, but he's not very good at it. But you can see the strings. You can see the hand up his back, and I can't help but think of that hand as his dad just after listening to you for a while. But, it's so stilted, whatever. It's just like we're watching him take an acting lesson.
I agree. I think this was probably kind of like an audition for him. And like you had the question of will he run in 2018? I think probably. Maybe it'll be in the district he actually lives in. Who knows?
That's what I think. Yeah. And also when you go back to the Kasim Reed thing and the guy in Detroit, like I think they have a bunch of people in the wing. So if he really couldn't make, like a test run, if he really couldn't do it, there's, I'm sure, somebody else, I feel like his father must have really pulled some strings or offered somebody saying, "Hey, look, a sock monkey could do it," or whatever. It'll just let my son do it and I'll give you half the money, because somebody's going to do it here.
Somebody made $1 bet in the bathroom.
Yes, with Randolph.
And Mortimer.
So I think he probably, I don't know if he was destined to win or lose. When the Republicans swept all these special elections, granted, they were all seats that had been held by Republicans. So, but it gives some legs to this Trump psyop, in my opinion. Like they're going to try to get a little more divisiveness out of it. And that only works if there's hope. So they're going to give Trump another, the next scene has to start with a little redemption of Trump, or it won't have any suspense. If you know the game's over, you're not going to watch through the next season. Right.
Yeah. That's the way they're framing it. Like, I don't know how everybody in that room was going crazy. Like, I mean, they spent $25 million, but people are genuinely like responding to this stuff because they spend $25 million on it, but they lost after spending $25 million on it yet.
And why would they put $25 million under to a neophyte absentee putt? Like it's just an annoying, that's probably a dirty word, but an annoying person. Let's say. Why would they put that much money in such an important race to a totally unproven, uncharismatic? Although my sister thought he was cute. So maybe it was for, the cuteness factor.
It's because of the familiarity. They show him a lot over and over again. You start to...
Yes. I do think, I'm going to take back something I said earlier, that there's like a bunch of them. And if he works, he works. I think his father, now that I listen to you, is so connected all the way back to like the CFR stuff, Council on Foreign Relations stuff, that he is going to be, he's tapped. He's not just one of a pool of kids they're pulling out of the bureaucratic pool. He's got,
his career has been calculated to be set up for this. He's
the political arm of his father's
filmmaker line is just unbelievable. Like I went back and looked at the other people who are associated with that company that he bought a title from is all he did. And to believe that this guy is in charge of all these people that are associated with a company are career documentary filmmakers who have won multiple awards doing like they have all actually done this. They're a lot older. They're older than him. They're successful. Yeah. They had awards long before he even was involved in this place. To think that somebody with no experience in filmmaking, no education in filmmaking, no journalistic education or training other than maybe writing an article while he was at Georgetown, to think that someone like that is going to be asked to be the boss of these career people who have already established themselves is absurd.
Yeah. What were his credentials that put him in that position?
Nothing. He didn't have any credentials. He had the credentials were, hey, my grandfather gave me like $20 billion. We can fund your thing if you give me the time.
That's right. I always forget that part. I think I can't get my mind around it.
All right. So I do think he'll be back. I think he'll be back. And, I don't know why they spent a whole bunch of money. Regardless of whether he won or not, what they have done is they are going to be able to, because I already got an email that last night from Indivisible saying how much of a win the whole Ossoff thing was and how it needs to continue to fuel this resistance movement. So I think they partly accomplish their purpose as long as they can deliver this message to the resistance movement, and the resistance movement will believe it. If they believe that this is a win for the Democrats, then they will continue to protest and continue till 2018, which they're trying to carry this resistance movement on for like a year and a half. It'll hold another year and a half to go, and maybe they'll do it.
I do think, though, kind of an answer to his question, he did, drawing the Obama parallels, maybe that's part of the answer that you did point out earlier, was that he's an empty suit. I mean, Obama was truly a blank slate. They did not even let him vote in the Senate. Like, there was nothing to read. Remember that? He had, I think, no votes.
Right.
When he ran the first time for president. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. So it's possible that's a draw, something appealing about Ossoff.
That's a good point. He doesn't have any votes in the Senate.
I thought you made that point.
He didn't. Yeah, I called him an empty suit, but the thing about Obama not having any votes, I didn't make that connection. Ossoff has never. He didn't vote in 2012.
He didn't vote yesterday.
Yeah, he didn't vote yesterday. I don't know if he's ever voted. Maybe he has. I have no idea. Let me play this clip. I just want to play this clip because I think I pointed it. I think I said this in text to you, maybe I tweeted it yesterday prior to the election. I said it's raining. Now the media on the left can blame the rain if Ossoff loses. So let me play this clip.
Yes, you did.
If there was a turnout effect from the bad weather today in the district, does that have any partisan implications that you could foresee in terms of what was expected for same-day, election day voting in here?
So this guy must be not only a meteorologist, but he is a political expert on the demographics in Georgia.
Well, and potentially. It all depends where it is. This is anecdotal, and we'll see when the results come in. There have been anecdotal reports, and I've even heard some Republicans saying this, that the turnout in DeKalb, this is the Democratic card of it. This is where, if you're Ossoff, you want to be getting 60, 61, 62% of the vote. You're expecting that. He got 60% in DeKalb. In the early vote, there have been some anecdotal reports, the turnout here in DeKalb, less than expected. That could be a same day. You could attribute that to anything. We'll see if that turns out. But
she goes, yeah, that must be it.
Because young people, it's so much harder for millennials to get out in the rain than the 65-year-old or 75-year-old people who are voting for Karen Handel.
Exactly.
It's true. I mean, that narrative works against them.
Yeah, and at the end of it, he said something. They framed it to where the county that Ossoff was supposed to get the most votes in is where there's a lower turnout, and the county where Handel is going to get the most votes, there's a higher turnout, and they tried to attribute that to rain. It's the stupidest thing. They don't sit down.
Only raining in the one.
Yeah, right. They must have been just flood rains, trees falling. That God really didn't want Ossoff voters coming out in DeKalb County.
Did you see the tweet from Goxram? Said he showed a map and it basically broke out that renters voted for Ossoff and homeowners voted for Handel.
Oh, I saw that.
I'll tell you,
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, when people like Ossoff say, I'm going to bring a bunch of jobs. And when I moved from LA to Atlanta, I was very happy to get away from film crews in every school parking lot. I paid to go take my kids to preschool, and these jerks would stand there and be like, "Oh, you can't come in today. Excuse, keep moving, lady." It's like, keep moving, lady? You are on a piece of property that I am paying to keep going, and you're yelling at me. And I didn't get like a tuition rebate at the end of the day. You know, this is how it was in LA. Coming to Atlanta and not having that experience anymore. Now I have that experience again.
Right.
Because the RIP policy promotes Georgia film, whatever. It's not like I'm getting money back with taxes. People come in and take those jobs. It's taking the tax money of the taxpayer base and transferring it to these companies, which are out-of-state companies a lot of times. I really don't know how the rules work. I shouldn't get too deep into that topic if I didn't do the research. But I will say this. It does not appeal to me at all when someone says, I will bring in a bunch of tech jobs or a bunch of film jobs into your nice little town and build some housing that renters can live in and pay much less property taxes than you do. It just doesn't appeal to me. And it changes the culture, which is, I'm sure it's like, makes real Atlantans cringe that I appreciate the culture and don't want all those uppity New Yorkers coming down. That's not true. I'm happy to have a melting pot. But it doesn't appeal to me to tell me you're going to bring 15,000 millennials into my community. That does not appeal to me. So I would think that homeowners would be of that ilk. And this guy was saying how he's going to bring those. Does that make me sound like, I'm afraid I sound snooty. Is that a snooty attitude, or is it reasonable to like a sleepy little bedroom community?
Well,
I mean, it just shows
everybody
my age.
wants to be in the middle of an artistic community. That's for downtown.
I did when I was young, but now I have kids. I can't live like that.
Right. But Kasim Reed's doing that anyway.
Oh yeah, he's turning everything into the Truman Show.
Yeah, Kasim Reed. You're right about him.
Like the trolleys and the greenways and oh my gosh, and the article that you sent me that I'd already tweeted that like everybody sent me about, there was a whole pullout in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was today, I read it online yesterday, but of driverless cars and all that stuff coming down, and that we will not own cars anymore, our kids won't know how to drive. Everybody sent it to me because I've been talking about that for years, and I have to return to this issue. The Uber guy, Kalanick, I think his name is, finally resigned today. And I have to tell you, I looked into the accident of his parents. Okay, so do you remember what I'm talking about from last week?
Yes, the boating accident that his parents had.
Right, so the Uber guy, founder, CEO, I don't know if he's actually founder, maybe he was, but they could not push him out. He's such a big shareholder. They kept pushing him out. There were so many scandals coming in, like, oh, he's a friend of Trump's. He's the culture of sexual harassment. They underpaid drivers. All his people are leaving him. Oh, his big guy stole software from Google, which was a huge investor in Uber, by the way. All this stuff just trying to get rid of this guy, and he would not resign. He took a leave of absence finally a week or two ago because his mother died in a boating accident and his father was seriously injured. So I told you last time, I immediately looked up, did he have a wife or kids? Because I'll completely dismiss that there was anything nefarious going on here if they targeted someone once removed from his closest family. But it was his closest family. They were lifelong boaters. They were from there. I think they were from, it was in a placid lake in Fresno. His brother is a firefighter in Fresno, so I assume they were there their whole lives. I don't think there was any suggestion there was alcohol involved. There was no, I would think that 71 and 75-year-old people are not speeding through this lake. It was a lake they were absolutely familiar with. The debris wasn't found for hours, so there was nobody around. It wasn't crowded, nothing. And they said it must have hit a rock, that they would investigate. There was no further reporting on the investigation at all. So it's a foul play, but There's no explanation for this accident at all, and none of the circumstances you would expect. Drugs or alcohol, speed, youth, unfamiliar territory, crowds, none of that stuff existed. There's no explanation.
That's interesting.
Do you still think it's less than 1%, or can we say it's a 1% chance there was funny business?
I can give you 1% chance. That's always.
I'm going to call that a victory. I'm going to call that like a Democrat style victory.
So you're saying there's a chance. 1%,
yeah.
1%.
You're telling me there's a chance.
Yeah. Just when there's no information on these accidents, it's it's strange.
No, for purposes of our show, I try to avoid leaping to conclusions from a million miles away without doing any research whatsoever. And then, of course, I go and look for the things that support my initial reaction.
Yeah.
But so I know there's like a huge fallacies in all of that. But I'm just throwing it out there I notice these connections.
Something to keep an eye on.
Fault me. If you don't like it, I'm happy to take polite criticism, and I will think hard about it. But I just thought that was something that was a little fishy. But we kind of got far away from it, but you were talking earlier about Walter Lippmann and Edward Bernays and these things. I read an article today in the Journal of Holman Jenkins, I think his name is. And I'm telling you, this guy referred to so many books and articles that you have turned us all on to that I thought maybe he'd been listening to the propaganda report, which I'm positive he hasn't, or you came up with a great idea, an idea I absolutely love. I do book reviews, but so if you go to my website, monicaparisha.com, I have a handful of book reviews, nothing earth-shattering, and a lot of book recommendations. But what you did, I thought was very clever, and I want to expand on it.
All right.
It's this tab of bookshelf. You called it the bookshelf, and it's the list of all the books that we talk about on the air, which I absolutely love that idea. Easy reference because we put them in the show notes, but it's nice to peruse and really understand what we're talking about. But I would like I think every top to bottom, which we should link to the show notes, it referred to articles and books. I'm certain that you had turned me on to all of that already for his own propaganda purposes. But what can you do? So I want to add to that. I want to add to your bookshelf. I have an actual bookshelf at home with probably 200 books on it. I have a wish list on Amazon. I have Goodreads, like to read, books I need to read. I have books that I have accumulated physically or just the titles of in all of these real deep history stuff that I've read that you've turned me on to. Just I haven't read most of them. I mean, I've read dozens of them, but I haven't read hundreds of them. But I thought we could share, and you probably have lists like that too. We can share lists like that. People can look at them. Maybe it's stuff that's on point, comment on it. So they can say, oh yeah, I read that one. It's good. I read that one. That's actually disinfo. Beware. That kind of thing, I think might be a fun and interesting and valuable resource. So we should try to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch of books that I haven't had a chance to read through yet that I'd love to put up there. And we can only read so much at one time, so it's. Oh
my gosh. I almost wonder if there's some way we can wiki it. So not wiki it, make it like a wiki thing. So if people have read the books, maybe if people comment on the bottom,
right.
I'm happy to cut and paste or copy some of those comments up to where the titles are to
right,
help us. Because that's what I do. Like on Goodreads, I have just one paragraph on, I think it's literally 350 books I've read. I just write a quick paragraph.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And that's helpful. So let's work on that. But if people want to check out what you've put up there so far, I think it's a pretty comprehensive list of the really interesting, important books that we've talked about, that have kind of broad implications.
Right. Like they do on Amazon. People who read the books give their little 4 stars and give reviews. We can try to set it up where we have listener reviews. Yeah, we'll give them credit for their review.
Yeah. That's cute. Yeah. Especially for stuff we haven't read. So what else you got?
Yeah. I want to. We were going to save this for another, but since we're on the topic, I want to read a couple. I want to read a couple passages to you and just get your reaction from one of Bernays' early books and how it relates, how you think it relates to what you see today.
Okay.
You want to do that? Does that sound like fun? Maybe.
Well, it does sound like fun. I have to warn you that I'm not sure I'm sharp enough to, on the fly, connect all the dots an hour and a half into this podcast. Well, but I am absolutely happy to try.
Okay, well, let's do it then. Might as well.
It's definitely going to be fun, and yes. Maybe we'll follow up on it over time as in the context of this framework, and then we can kind of fill that in over the weeks to come.
Yeah, this book that I'm reading from is called Crystallizing Public Opinion, and it's basically it's a precursor to his book Propaganda. He goes through this book and he talks about a lot of the knowledge that the propagandist, or he calls it the public relations council, he uses the two terms interchangeably, what they need to know and understand in order to manipulate the public without the public realizing it. And
what year was this? Sorry, did I miss that?
This one was in 1923, I believe.
And this was?
Edward Bernays, 1923.
Right.
One that we touch on a lot. The average citizen is the world's most efficient censor. His own mind is the greatest barrier between him and the facts. His logic-proof compartments, his own absolutism are obstacles which prevent him from seeing in terms of experience and thought rather than in terms of group reaction.
Wait, can I talk?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's the end of the quote.
I have something to say. I thought they imposed that from the outside, that manufacturing consent of Noam Chomsky, manufacturing advocacy is a term I coined. But can you read it again? You can read it faster, but just...
yeah. The average citizen is the world's most efficient censor. His own mind is the greatest barrier between him and the facts. His own logic-proof compartments, his own absolutism are the obstacles which prevent him from seeing in terms of experience and thought rather than in terms of group reaction.
Okay. Yes. I remember I was friends with a guy in law school who there were a lot of smart people there. Like, that's the thing. I talk about these Ivy League schools, brainwashing people, whatever. But they do set the bar pretty high of who they let in, and you can really get exposed to people who think obviously totally different from me. Like, there's a lot of political pragmatism and ambition and stuff like that. But you could really pick some stuff up, like just from several different people. I would pick this like really different insight into how to think or look at the world. And this one guy would make, it was like he was a tinkerer kind of, and he would just say, all right, look at this thing. How does it work? And you'd have to think about it. It's like, if you had to fix it, what would you do?
Yeah.
Another thing he used to do is say, how much should this cost? How much should it cost? And I'd be like, I don't know how much it should cost. I don't know what it is. Well, just look at it. How sophisticated is it? What is it made of? How hard is it to put together? And give me a number. And after that, I would walk around and just look at the world and be like, oh, I can really understand the world if I just observe it. And that's when I had the insight that psychology and sociology, which at one time, I think 100 years ago or so, I love William Graham Sumner and Christopher Dawson. I love some of these older psychologists and sociologists. I felt like sociology and psychology were corrupted or used or exploited in order to get people to disconnect their own observations from what they think, how they think things really work. But what you're telling me, unless he's just saying this sophisticatedly as if it's in you already. I'm not doing it to you, but he's really doing it to you because his uncle was Sigmund Freud. But what I'm hearing from this passage is we're doing it to ourselves. Like we are not allowing ourselves to really observe our own experiences because they don't fit into the boxes we want to believe in.
Yeah, that's partially true. That they exploit the existing stereotypes that we all have in our mind that we formed throughout our lifetimes based on based on the groups that we're a part of. Like the Republican has a specific stereotype of a liberal when, liberal terms are triggered. And that stereotype of a liberal is different from the liberal stereotype of a liberal, and vice versa when it comes to how the liberals are
that's so
conservatives.
Genius.
So
yes, well, didn't Freud say? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they leverage the existing stereotypes and they link them using vague but emotional value-based language, kind of like Ossoff was using. He just said values, actually. He didn't even pick values. He was so general. He just said values of unity, and everybody went crazy. And they know especially today, because they have so much data on us, they know the stereotypes that the individual groups have of other groups, and they use those stereotypes to divide and conquer and to trigger emotional responses in the group, because stereotypes we're all a part of a bunch of different groups, even when we're alone, when we're on Twitter and Facebook,
yes,
we're still reacting as a group, right. So they trigger those stereotypes that are already there.
Listen.
What?
When you were saying that, you said that it's so genius. You were saying there's what liberals think liberals are, what Republicans think, or what conservatives think liberals are, whatever. So there's really 4 stereotypes and the 2 stereotypes.
Yeah.
And it was Sigmund Freud, I think, who said, this is where it comes from, so interesting, who said, when 2 people make love, there are 4 people in the bed. It's the person you
think you are?
It's either, the person you think you are and the person you are, or the other person thinks you are. I can't remember which, who it is, but it's who you think you are.
Who they think
you are.
Yeah.
Who you think they are and who they think they are. But I don't know if there was no actual person in any of those 4 people. Right. But I want to ask you, if you wouldn't mind giving me your opinion on the exact specific thing I'm grappling with here. Is it true? So you're saying the reason we don't observe what's around us is because we have these boxes formed. Is that just your basic social conditioning from youth? It's just the boxes we form. We have to categorize things. It's like a developmental thing. You have to categorize things. You have to generalize.
It's stereotypes are shortcuts in thinking. There's so much information.
Right, and they manipulate those. It's clear they manipulate those from very young ages, and I believe there were a lot of experiments on little kids and stuff in Russia right before the folk music and rock and roll and stuff from the 60s was brought here, and that dovetails to me with this idea that Russia was like a experiment, the Soviet Union. It was almost like they experimented over there with things and then brought them here because there was no protections. I don't know. But anyway, there's a lot. I don't want to go down every path.
Right.
Although.
Yeah, so here's Bernays' quote from this book on stereotypes is, psychological habits, or stereotypes as Walter Lippmann termed them, are shorthand by which human effort is minimized. They are so clearly and commonly understood that everyone will immediately respond to the mention of the stereotype within his personal experience. The word capitalist or Boy Scout brings out definitive images to the hearer. These images are more comprehensible than detailed descriptions. Chorus girl, woman lawyer, politician, detective, financier are clean-cut concepts and capable of definition. We all have stereotypes which minimize not only our thinking habits, but also the ordinary routine of life.
That does go right to what we were talking about in the last show.
Yeah.
So there was a big effort about in this book, Peace, from the wonderful people who brought you Korea and Vietnam. And it talks about how the UN's number one thing was to, and this was back like right after the UN was formed, that their number one weapon was to like deracinate. I don't know if that, I think that's a racist word in itself, like to get rid of the concept of race, even though it was a valid concept. And you could even say race as nationality or ethnicity or anything like that. I mean, you know, in Africa surely is something very different from Native Americans, you know, and to not allow people to use those terms or think in those ways was a big thing with them. They were attacking that. However, they would never give up such a powerful instrument as what you just described, and they haven't, because now you have deplorables, you have alt-right, you have snowflakes, you have it's all there.
Oh,
they
yeah.
have, however, you know, they do cut some out, maybe that were unfair or negative or whatever. I mean, I think we're going to have, again, like, I think we're going to have, I'm going to have to carry this around with me a little bit and try to observe the world and fit it into those boxes, you know, try to understand the scaffolding.
Well, what they do is they exploit the stereotypes that trigger those powerful emotional responses in the group so that people cannot, so it short circuits their critical thinking, as we talked about, so that people only see through those simplicities, and by getting them to respond through the group, it takes away that reasonable conversation that is necessary for, you know, coming to a better answer or to even have.
And how does that fold into how powerful race is in politics?
Absolutely.
So I thought Obama might let that go. They might like put that to rest, help us to rest. But instead, he exacerbated it.
Yes, it's such a powerful.
They'd never do. But how does that fold into this? Is that a totally separate issue? The political power of identity groups, is that different from the stereotype thing? Because it seems connected, and maybe I'm just being.
Oh, I think it's totally connected to it. That's the racial stereotypes that people have, and they do the stereotypes. We're going to form them anyway, because we have to have these automatic, you know. We can't analyze whether the floor is actually beneath us every single day or not. We'd never go anywhere. So we have to have these shortcuts in thinking where we see something that looks like a floor, so we automatically react as though it's going to act like a floor. And the same thing with racial stereotypes. They can create these racial stereotypes through the media in our minds, and then they can either exploit events that happen or trigger other events to happen. And
this black versus blue thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They totally want people. They can use that in so many powerful ways, as you've pointed out many times, through the media. So they have no reason to try and diffuse that. And you're right, Obama played into it.
Could have, and he didn't. And so, but what they do with that is they use the race issue as a weapon for sure, the identity thing in that. But they always, I've observed this before, either cut off videos and make it ambiguous, the art of ambiguity, or they take situations. The guy who got shot was doing something that a normal person might think, like your normal soccer mom driving home isn't going to say to the cop, "Oh, I'm just going to get my gun." You know, you're never going to say that. You just don't even have the gun. So they play into stereotypes, even these stories, whether they just pick stories that play into there's that ambiguity only works because, and I've noticed this, but this was really bringing it together for me, the stereotype. How when you look at these stories of like a black guy getting shot by a cop, 50% of the people can look at it one way and 50% of the people can look at it the other way. It's clearly because of what you think. You're like, well, that's an inner city black guy with a knife. I can understand why the cop would be. And then somebody else would say,
there's the four perceptions, like you said, with Freud.
Yeah, the cop on the beat in the inner city knows this guy. He's just selling cigarettes. It wasn't even a knife. You know, what is he, an idiot? You know, so yes.
Right, yeah. But it's the four different perceptions, like you said with Freud. It's how the cop perceives. It's how the cop perceives himself. How the inner city black kid might perceive the cop. How he perceives himself, and vice versa. So it's these conflicting perceptions that have a lot of times been enhanced, and clarity has been brought to them. That's the thing about these stereotypes. If there's any confusion or complexity about certain stereotypes that they want to exploit through propaganda, the media will make them crystal clear. They will bring Bernays talks about this a lot. They will bring the fuzziness into clarity and tell them what to think, crystallizing these stereotypes and defining the groups so that they can, pit them against each other. In fact, here's another quote from the book that says that a lot better. And Bernays is actually quoting Lippmann here, that other book, that Public Opinion that I talk about. But he says, Mr. Lippmann finds that the stereotypes at the center of the code by which various sections of the public live largely determine what group of facts we shall see and in what light we shall see them. That's why a capitalist sees one set of facts and certain aspects of human nature, literally sees them, and his socialist opponent another set of facts and other aspects, and why each regards the other as unreasonable or perverse, when the real difference between them is in that of perception. The difference is imposed by the difference between the capitalist and the social pattern and the socialist pattern of stereotypes.
I have two comments. One is I've always wanted to see a real study, which we will never see, of if liberals are right-brained, like by far, and conservatives are left-brained by far, because it's that I've talked about before, fiscal insecurity versus physical insecurity. It's that perception thing. Maybe I don't know, because it's not a question of IQ, I don't think. It's just this. I just feel like that left-right thing is just, they're just two different brain patterns, and they exploit those. Now, I want to say one thing about the stereotype that doesn't fit. Bill Cosby is demonized by the media, and Michael Jackson was not. Michael Jackson was absolutely no threat to the stereotype, whereas Bill Cosby is a successful Black guy who speaks in the, American high dialect, like High German, the American high dialect. He's not like your token Black guy that the white community loves to trot around because he's conservative. He's not. He was an advocate for some real wisdom for that would help the Black community not be exploited by the political forces. I think. I never made a study of Bill Cosby, but I feel like he had to be destroyed because he would have had power and influence in a way that didn't serve the agenda that is served by very specific stereotypes.
Yeah, and that's, don't get me wrong, Bill Cosby admitted that he, was drugging people.
Yeah, but what did Michael Jackson do? The FBI supposedly suppressed evidence against him. I'm not talking about guilt or innocence. Let's say they're both guilty.
Right, no, I know.
Why was Michael Jackson, he went and was continuing
to
do it. Yeah, but Cosby isn't continuing to do it. Nobody's even accusing him of continuing to do it. But Michael Jackson was enabled to continue to do it.
Right, and that's what I'm saying you're right. I'm agreeing with you. That's why, because he shatters.
And you're right. I shouldn't say that these people are innocent. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I just wanted to qualify that I'm not siding with Cosby. I'm just saying that I'm agreeing with you that they don't let him get away with it because he doesn't fit the stereotype that supports the agenda.
Yes, and for me, I really should come full circle on that. My observation with Bill Cosby, I might be misinterpreted as thinking like he's a good role model, an example. I am absolutely not saying that. I think his political, the free speech that he was exercising was having an undesirable political impact. Yeah. And that is why he was targeted. I think it is a way of persecuting people for political reasons, taking their free speech away their rights of free speech, which is why in the beginning, when we were talking about the due process issue of not being able to face your accuser or whatever, it makes these kind of setups where they will take you out for purely political motives, and they can conjure up. I mean, everybody's guilty of something when there are a million crimes on the books or whatever. I mean, you're always going to be able to find something. So I just feel like that's actually in action. I mean, I think they changed laws of statute of limitations so he could be prosecuted for crimes that were just too old.
Yeah, I was curious about that.
That's called like an ex post facto law, and it's an absolute violation of the most fundamental legal principle that if the law is X and you're relying on it, you can't change it and then retroactively.
Right. Yeah. All right. I have one more quote that speaks to all of them. And then I guess we can wrap it up. You're
really taxing my little brain cells here.
This one is from Public Opinion. I switched books. This is Walter Lippmann. He says, and he's talking about stereotypes. He says, for the most part, we do not first see and then define. We define first and then we see. And the great blooming, buzzing confusion of the outer world, we pick out what our culture has already defined for us, and we tend to perceive that which we have picked out in the form stereotyped for us by our culture. That's a heavy one.
You lost me. You guys like start over or summarize. You got to start over. You can do it fast. I got like the impression in my brain.
No, this is a heavy one. I have to read this one all the time. For the most part, we do not first see and then define what we see. We define first and then we see it.
Yes.
In the great blooming, buzzing confusion of the outer world, we pick out what our culture has already defined for us, and then we tend to perceive that which we have picked out in the form stereotyped for us by our culture. So it's kind of vague and confusing, but what our culture plucks up
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like data mining, actually.
There's more to it than that.
See, that's a great relation to this quote to today, is data mining. Is they're going to pick out and tell us what's important and tell us how to perceive it.
Yes, and that is why that, like, social conditioning from infanthood is so important, because
they want forming stereotypes in our mind, is what they want.
Right. I start to wonder, like, I know everything that we read, you and I, is basically accessible on the open internet. And I know they can scrub that stuff.
Yeah.
I wonder, I always feel like with every layer of the onion that I peel, a more sophisticated prefab set of boxes.
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, the boxes you find, he says you define it first and then you find the thing to put in that box, is how I'm like, distilling what you just said.
Yeah, I think so.
And I'm just saying my boxes, that's why, like, the alt-right, that's why I don't like to go down the Israel, talk about the politics of Israel, because there is this huge body of, like, internet are like anti-Israel policy, but then also anti-Semitic. So it kind of like mushes it together. And it's really, like, virulent. I don't like to even go to, but it's, it has huge, these things have big, big followings. And I noticed it for a long time. It's when I saw, like, alt-right stuff emerging, kind of misogynistic stuff. Like, they like real anti-female stuff, but like stuff that's just tasteful. And it was weird to me. Like, it was so getting so mainstream. And then Trump comes out and it's kind of like stuff, in the campaign. I don't think he does it anymore. And then Hillary came and gave us the deplorables basket and all that stuff. I can't help but think, like, even that stuff, that layer where the people who like it are, they think they're cracking the code. They think they're peeling the onion. but it's this stuff that's already packaged so that even if there are true facts in it, it's still not thinking really for themselves. And I think I'm another layer down, from that level. And I'm not even talking like I'm a deeper than alt-right. I'm like ultra alt-right. I'm not. I'm saying just like say the surface level, and then there's another level that has anything from alt-right to alt-left to all that. I'm just talking about, I think it's what Corey, who wrote an article for us called the side stream media, he focuses that it's like on the right, but I think it's all over. You could even say like Vox and Vice and all that stuff. Maybe
you're right about the alt-right. The alt-right was that's a great example of what that quote represents right there. It is before Hillary Clinton gave that speech, the alt-right was a fuzzy idea that most of us had never heard of, right? But Hillary Clinton raised it up and made it crystal clear and defined it for the entire country when she gave that speech. And that definition got reinforced over and over again through the media. And then people who were part of it or who wanted to be part of it, they either separated themselves from it or they embraced it and further crystallized what people's opinion of the alt-right is.
But when she did that, I was trying to puzzle through of where is it all coming from? Because there was a lot of it, it was up to the level of it was just too much. There's too much production, and you would see like a new YouTube channel come up and all of a sudden it's got 50,000 subscribers. I'm like, this is something up here,
Yeah.
So I saw when she said that, I immediately realized that something I had been observing for a couple of years had clearly, I think, was a bit of a setup. And so now I wonder where am I now? I am, I did talk about this last time too. I'm not trying to be narcissistic. I'm really trying to figure out like stuff. But I also talk about this stuff on the mainstream media. I talk about it on WSB. I struggle with that role. Am I just another layer, the relief valve? There's another like box. Oh, she thinks the Council of Foreign Relations is trying to create a world government, that Rockefeller and Brzezinski and stuff, they're the guys. Maybe it's the real power structure is like ancient. It's like the Knights Templar thing. Maybe it's really, truly ancient, and everything that you and I is just another, that they have layers and layers of these boxes to keep more and more sophisticated analysts in, like the way we talk about the level of propaganda, like the Atlantic magazines for the intellectuals.
Yeah.
It seems like they're really going deep, but
I think, and
then I'm like, well, is it, am I making myself crazy now?
No, I'm totally.
I'm like paranoid. This is like a paranoid that I'm
every
not
time
paranoid
I think,
enough.
no, every time I think I figure something out, I say, I haven't figured shit out. They just want me to think I figured it out so that I stop looking for the answer. And I raise my fist in the air and scream, bastards.
Yeah, and then, oh my gosh, you can go another, like I'm really dancing on the surface here, but when you start going into the freaky stuff, like the fifth dimension stuff, and you tap into your spiritual power and you can change the world, maybe, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's probably somebody listening right now who's like, yes, you focus on the stuff in the news that's so stupid when there's a fifth dimension that you could access if you turned your thoughts, completely away from that. Now, I've kind of gone down a path where I've invested time in doing this, and I think there's a value in it, and maybe eventually I will get to that truth. But there are people who think the truth is cosmic, that it's, and then I'm a practicing Catholic. I get how kind of crazy it seems to think that there's person, a God who is a person who you're going to talk to and know your name and look like you. Like, it's hard to get my mind around it, but I really don't know the nature of the fifth dimension. So maybe I should focus on that. Maybe this is all a diversion, so you don't actually discover the truth about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love going into that stuff. I love thinking about it. I don't know as much about that stuff as I would like to, but I love reading about it and learning about it. I think analyzing the media is in the big picture. I think it's just like any other skill. Like if you're trying to learn how to play basketball, the more you do it, the more you're going to just be able to make every shot you take, like they do in the NBA. So I think being able to analyze this, do what?
So that's good. So we're getting good at that. But I also think to make progress. So like I want to get you to keep peeling those layers of the onion and not just like run around to different places on the same layer of the onion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to keep figuring it out. And I think this is actually not like, I think it's a breakthrough to see it that way. So let's hope that it kind of bears fruit.
Yeah.
Over time. Maybe I'm even losing you.
I'm total. Everything you're talking about, I'm on the same wavelength.
Oh, okay. All right, great. All right.
That's all I got today.
Well, you've completely. I've had terrible nights sleep the past couple of nights, so I hope I did not fall apart.
No, I thought you're great.
Analyze your throwing that stuff at me, but
yeah, I know. Okay. I threw it at you last minute. This is some heavy stuff, but I thought it'd be interesting. You had good insights. You always do.
It's good. Thank you very much. So that's it. That concludes episode 50 of the Propaganda Report. I'm sure we will have plenty more to talk about next week. Thank you, Binkley. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. See you later.